There is a mute function in the lower left hand of the platform. I think that's always helpful. If we have to mute everyone, then we cut off the speaker briefly before we have to unmute her. So it's just easier if everyone can go ahead and practice now. And let's check and make sure that we are muting ourselves. Please monitor the chat function. The chat function is also on the bottom of the platform. If you hover, you'll see chat. That'll open up the side box. The chat function is important because the chat function is where you have an opportunity to ask questions of Harpreet, as well as Ashley will be sending out a document or a link to a document for you to be able to sign in and to be able to get your CEUs. So please keep an eye out on the chat function as well. Great, so tonight we have the honor of having Harpreet Gujral. Harpreet is a clinician and healthcare administrator who brings 3 decades of experience in various clinical areas. She helped with the launch of the Johns Hopkins Sibley Integrative Medicine program, both as the program director and nurse practitioner. She most recently co-led this program by directing and managing day-to-day operations and providing integrative medicine consultations. She's also a family nurse practitioner and has served as the program director and nurse practitioner at the Sibley Weight Loss Surgery department. Dr. Gujral received her doctorate in nursing practice degree, focusing on integrative health and healing track at the University of Minnesota under the mentorship of Dr. Jo Kreitzer. She has a deep interest and is well informed in modalities like aromatherapy, guided imagery, including various Eastern modalities such as Ayurveda, mindfulness, meditation, and yoga that are enhanced by her roots in India. She deeply believes in one's inner capacity to heal. Additionally, she has completed Integrative Nurse Coaching Certificate Program. She is currently enrolled in a 2-year meditation teacher program with Dr. Brach and Kornfield. Her interests include mindful eating, self-compassion, healthy cooking, mindful pause, health coaching that brings together various aspects of integrative health. She enjoys uplifting and nurturing her colleagues using mindful pause, appreciation, and the practice of gratitude. She loves to walk in nature, and her family and her friends engage in music and poetry. Also, in addition to just thanking Harpreet so much for donating her time, I also want to acknowledge you because when I had some of my own struggles with burnout as a frontline clinician a number of years ago, self-compassion was such an important part of my healing, and it continues to be a part of my daily practice that I really appreciate. So Ashley, thank you for bringing this topic to us. Harpreet, you're on. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing with your wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sean. I was only 5 years old when I became a nurse, so the 30 years of experience just makes me 35 years old today. So, I just wanted to say, since last week, our department actually closed. So I call this my past program director of Sibley Integrative Medicine. And however, the lessons is much more needed. And self-compassion is something I particularly am interested in because this was something I did not do for the longest time. I thought that if I was my biggest self-critic, I could actually rise and do better because I can always be reminding myself how much more I need to do. So today we'll just talk about self-compassion. What does that mean? What it's not? And then talk about the 3 components of self-compassion. This is the work of Dr. Kristen Neff, who has conceptualized that. We'll talk about benefits of self-compassion and maybe a small experience if we have time, and, and also provide you some resources for self-compassion. What self-compassion is not. It's actually not narcissism. It's not self-indulgence. It's not self-pity. It's not being selfish. Self-compassion is actually practicing kindness for self, and it's actually being mindfully present, and it's also knowing that we are imperfect. So it's actually looking at and being comfortable with our mistakes and being imperfect, we strive to do better, but we don't speak negatively to ourselves. I mean, this is how we might speak to our best friend, maybe our mentor, maybe our mentee. How might we speak to someone who is coming to us and saying, this is my problem, this is a concern, what do you recommend? So I'm not going to yell at them. I'm not going to say, you're such a failure, you'll never get this right, you always make these mistakes. And yet, I personally have said these things to myself. And so this was a very important topic for me to understand what this means. So it has three components. The three elements of self-compassion include self-kindness, like I was saying, and the opposite of that is self-judgment. It's the second component is common humanity. And I'll go into detail of with each one of them. I'll explain what that means. So common humanity versus isolation. And the third element is mindfulness versus over-identification with what's happening. Let's look at each one of them individually. So as I mentioned, these self-compassion actually was conceptualized by Dr. Kristen Neff. It's with a Kristen, Neff, and her book is called Self-Compassion. She and Dr. Chris Germer, they have actually done a lot of work around self-compassion. She actually used Dr. Sharon Salzberg's kindness, loving kindness work, and used mindfulness, loving kindness, and focuses inwards and conceptualized self-compassion. So first component is self-kindness. So self-kindness is being our best friend. It means we are warm, we're understanding, we're kind to ourselves, and we know that we have no contract, that we're not going to suffer, that something will not go wrong. You know, there is no guarantee, as we know, as you know the most. I mean, you see people in their most vulnerable times. You see when they have things happen to them that's totally not what they were expecting to happen. And so you find them in their most vulnerable time, and knowing that suffering is happens, like life, suffering happens. And so during that suffering, what can we do to really allow ourselves to feel better? So instead of feeling inadequate, imperfect, getting upset with ourselves, being more critical, can we use kindness to ourselves and say, Harpreet, I know this is really hard, but I'm here for you. Let's see what needs to be done. How can we get through this tragedy, this suffering, this difficult situation? What needs to happen? Versus my self-critic, that takes over and starts yelling at me, then I'm actually focused more, a lot of my energy gets focused on listening to the self-critic and not having all the resources available to me to actually take care of what's happening in the situation. So I'm fully focused so that all my cortical functions are present for me to do the best job and stay focused, versus noticing what's the ruminating thoughts or the self-critic that's talking over at me. So self-compassionate people, what happens is it's a cultivation. So when I started to practice or learn about self-compassion, I thought to be successful, to have best work ethic, and to have high expectations of myself, I also need to have a self-critic. That self-critic is going to keep me in line. It's going to help me to aspire and make me accountable so I can get to all the things I need to do so I can stay accountable. And yet I recognize, as I learned more about self-compassion, is it actually is counterproductive. So when I'm having my self-critic talk to me, I'm actually not able to focus on what needs to be done. I cannot be focused on the next steps. So people who are self-compassionate, they can recognize that we are imperfect. They recognize that we'll always not be successful in what we start to do. They recognize that we will have difficulties in our life, and we must be gentle and kind to ourselves so we can ride the situation and do our best work through those very difficult times. So we can't put ourselves down, we can't get angry and mad at ourselves. And what I found is when I started to practice self-compassion, I was able to be more kind to others. It was so much easier to be forgiving and to not get angry or upset with daily nuisance. You know, normally you might get in a line at the grocery store that's so long, you might get upset. You're like, I always get in the wrong line. What's wrong with me? Or getting upset with someone else. And so I think it's really important for the self-compassion. In fact, as Sean mentioned, I'm getting my mindfulness teacher training, and Jack Kornfield, he's a psychologist and a Buddhist mindfulness teacher. He tells a story where this woman was standing in the line in the grocery store, and the line just wasn't moving. And so she was getting frustrated. She was noticing how upset she was. And then she saw, you know, this woman in front of her hand her child. She started talking to the cashier, and then she handed her child to the cashier. And this person got really upset. Like, she had been waiting so long. She had one item to check out, and she just couldn't believe that they were taking their sweet time and chatting and socializing in this way, and then handing the audacity to hand her child to the cashier and really delaying the line. And so she kind of, you know, took a deep breath and said, okay, I'm a mindfulness, teacher, I'm a student. I need to pay attention. Maybe there's something I don't understand right now. But anyways, when her turn came, the cashier said, thank you so much for your patience. You know, my husband is actually, has been deployed in war. And this was my mom who brings my daughter, my toddler daughter, to meet me while I'm at the grocery store working the double shift. So this person now who has been judging the woman in the front realized, like, she had judged this person and really given them, you know, not the benefit of the doubt, and only to find out that, you know, what was the situation. So I think I'm beginning to understand a lot of times is when I start to get upset, I try to give benefit of the doubt. There must be something that's going on in people's life, and they, you know, pass us in traffic and are not following rules and didn't give signal and get right into our lane. I actually send them off with a prayer and, for their safety, because truly they're not driving safely, and try not to judge them. So the second element of self-compassion is common humanity versus isolation. So common humanity means that all of us, you know, have difficult lives, we have some suffering, and that it's not just myself who's making all the mistakes. I mean, this is part of who we are as human beings. So instead of being frustrated and saying, oh, Harpreet, you're the only one who makes all these mistakes, who's, you know, not up to the par, did not get everything done that was on my list, you know, I'm slacking off, everybody else is doing great, you know, and I'm the only one. So that can actually lead to a lot of suffering. We as human beings are people who are in tribes. We are pack people. We love to be part of something. Like, for example, your group, you know, this connection that you have with each other, knowing that there is this group camaraderie that, you know, connects you, that glues you together. And when we feel that we are the only one who's imperfect, we feel so isolated. That is actually a lot of suffering that happens with it. So self-compassion, it means recognizing that we are suffering, that we are imperfect, we're inadequate, And that is part of a shared human experience. Like a lot of other people are also imperfect, just like me. And it's okay, and I'm part of that group that is imperfect. And so that allows us to then not feel isolated or alone in such a way. The third element of self-compassion is mindfulness versus over-identification. So this is where we are willing to actually observe these negative thoughts. So I see them as clouds, right? So the clouds come by, and these are negative thoughts that come by, and they go, Harpreet, you're going to suck at this. You're not going to be good. The next one is, Harpreet, how dare you sign up for a doctorate program? You're not going to be able to do this. The next one is, you are trying to be a director, like you're an imposter. Nobody's going to believe you. The cloud is going by. And if I over-identify with that cloud and just cling on to it, I might believe into that, and I might never try something. And so I think it's really important to notice that these clouds of thoughts will just pass by if I'm present and mindful. That I can be present in the moment. My feet are on the ground. I am noticing my body's present right here. My mind is present right here. And I notice that a thought just came by. You know, we know the mind is like a popcorn machine. Just like popcorn machine is going to pop the popcorn, you know, it's going to pop the corn. The mind is going to have pop-up thoughts. We almost have 20,000 to 30 or 40,000 thoughts a day. And they're usually the same kind, you know, same if I'm ruminating and I'm upset, or, you know, I'm self-deprecating, then same thoughts keep coming on and again. It's like the same channel on TV or the radio. But if I am present and I notice those thoughts come by and I don't identify with those thoughts and I'm present mindfully, I don't fall prey to that, because the mind is going to think about it and I say, oh, wow, that thought just came, you know, the thought that I was an imposter, the thought that I couldn't do this, the thought that I'm not, you know, good at this. And I notice it and I just let it go by as a cloud, because I'm present mindfully to the present moment without judgment and being curious. So that allows us to then not suffer. So it's the non-judgmental, receptive mind state where you're observing thoughts and feelings pass by. So for example, you know, if you're not a cloud person, you might be a river person. Like let's say, you know, I work close to Potomac River. So the river goes by, I can see the stones and the water is going through. If I fall into the river, I know you're going to come to rescue me. But anyways, if I fall into the river, I can be swayed by that water current, and I'll be in it, riding in it, trying to, you know, protect myself. And yet, if I was standing right outside the river and the bank, and I see this water go through, you know, some of it is like lots of current going through the stones, you know, some really difficult, you know, stream of water. I can see it, I can visualize it, but I'm not in it. So I don't get swayed by it. I don't get drowned in the water. I'm standing on the bank. So that is mindfulness, where we're standing, noticing our thoughts, our feelings, what's happening. And it's almost at times comical. It's really comical now at times for me when I sit there and I notice the thoughts come as a cloud, to say, wow, same thought came just like yesterday, same thought came just now. And for me to be not believe in that thought, especially if it's a negative thought. So mindfulness requires that we're not over-identifying with those thoughts and emotions, and we're actually able to biohack through mindfulness and through presence in the body. I can biohack and not allow the brain to spew, you know, all these negative chemicals that will put me into anxiety or panic or feeling sad or depressed. It's I'm able to stop myself and say, no, I'm not going to, you know, be swayed by that cloud of self-doubt, of self-critic. I'm present to notice that that's not true. That if I put my mind to it and I have my clear agenda of things that I'm doing, and I got most of the important things done, I am doing fine. So those are really important 3 components that lead to self-compassion. So self-compassion exercise, let's just do, it's a 5-minute exercise. I'm just gonna go ahead and play that. And as you can see on this website right now, so it's self-compassion.org, which is a resource. And there are all these resources available for free. So we're gonna use just the shortest exercise.
Harpreet, I'm not sure that we're hearing.
Okay.
I'm not sure that we're hearing the exercise.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you for letting me know. So I will just close this right here, and let me see here. So here, okay.
You want us
So thank you.
You want to try again?
I can absolutely. Or what I will do is.
I may be able to pull it up. I don't know.
Okay, so it's selfcompassion.org.
Yep,
and under practices, guided self-compassion exercises.
Self-compassion practices and exercises.
Yes, exercises. And the last one of all is the shortest one. It's 5 minutes.
Oh, I love the self-compassion break. Okay, I'm going to try it.
This
Ready?
practice is called the self-compassion break, and it's something you can do anytime during the day or at night.
Is that working?
Yes, it is.
All right, here we go.
When you need a little self-compassion. So to practice this exercise, we actually need to call up a little suffering. So I'd invite you to think about a situation in your life right now that is difficult for you. Maybe you're feeling stress, or you're having a relationship problem, or you're worried about something that might happen. I'd invite you to think of something that is difficult, but not overwhelmingly difficult, especially if you're new to practicing the self-compassion break. So finding a situation and getting in touch with it. What's going on? What happened? Or what might happen? Who said what? Really bring the situation to life in your mind's eye. And then I'm going to be saying a series of phrases that are designed to help us remember the 3 components of self-compassion when we need it most. So the first phrase is, this is a moment of suffering, right? We're bringing mindful awareness to the fact that suffering is present. And I'd invite you to find some language that speaks to you. Something like, this is really hard right now. Or, I'm really struggling. We're actually turning toward our difficulty, acknowledging it, naming it. This is a moment of suffering. The second phrase is, suffering is a part of life. Okay, we're reminding ourselves of our common humanity. Suffering is a part of life. And again, finding language that speaks to you. It may be something like, it's not abnormal to feel this way. Many people are going through similar situations. Right? The degree of suffering may be different, the flavor of suffering may be different, but suffering is a part of life, part of being human. And then the third phrase is, may I be kind to myself in this moment. And to support bringing kindness to yourself, I'd invite you to perhaps put your hands over your heart or some other place on your body that feels soothing and comforting. Feeling the warmth of your hands, the gentle touch. Letting those feelings of care stream through your fingers. May I be kind to myself. And using any language that supports that sense of kindness. Perhaps language you would use with a good friend you cared about who was going through a very similar situation. You know, it may be something like, I'm here for you. It's going to be okay. I care about you. You can even try using a diminutive if that feels comfortable. You know, oh darling, I'm so sorry. Or you can try calling yourself by your first name. Anything that feels natural to express your deep wish that you be well and happy and free from suffering. And then letting go of the practice and noticing how your body feels right now. Allowing any sensations to be just as they are. Allowing yourself to be just as you are in this moment. This practice.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
So, it's interesting. For me, what I've done is when this feelings arise, I've actually learned to hold my hand in my hand in a safe place. When I'm practicing cultivating self-compassion, I've taught myself that if I hold my hands in a certain way, and I could be holding in my lap, nobody has to see it. I could be at work, I could be in a situation elsewhere where it's difficult. And then sitting there in mindfulness, I notice, I put my feet on the ground, I sense maybe there are butterflies in my stomach, or maybe there is this unrest, maybe there is sadness or upset in my chest area, maybe it's in my head. And I put both my hands, I put them in my lap, and I say, yeah, Harpreet, this is really hard. It's landing on you really, you know, in a difficult way. Maybe it's upset me, maybe I'm sad. And so by holding my hand in that way, by being present in the moment and acknowledging that this is hard, it allows me then to deal with it, be fully present, and not lose my cortical, you know, functioning, my higher frontal cortex functioning, so I can be present in that moment where the situation could be pretty challenging. So there is a poem by Rumi. He's the 14th century poet. And when Kristen talks about like allowing the suffering and whatever's arising, just welcoming that. So there's a poem called The Guest House. It's, I'll just go ahead and share that. It says, this being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out of some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice. Meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So this is one of my favorite poems by Rumi. I'm not sure how he knew this to be so wise, in the 14th century, to be able to share this. So anyways, so that's the guest house poem. So coming back to the self-compassion, is this science-based? I mean, should we just believe what Kristen says, or should we just believe what Harpreet or Sean were talking about self-compassion? Or does this really have some benefits? So we know self-compassion has been shown in literature, in science, that it actually brings better physical health. For example, how I was mentioning about biohacking. When we just put a fake smile on our face, or we're present with ourselves and we can put our hand on our heart, our chest area, we can put our hand and self-soothe, there is this knowing that the body gets this knowing that we're going to be okay. This is a very difficult time. For example, right now, through the pandemic, through social injustice, through all these difficult times, can I just, instead of rattling myself with all the news that's coming in and all the negative things that are happening, is it possible for me to say, you know what, Harpreet, I'm going to practice self-compassion. I'm going to be my best friend. I'm going to be present here through these difficult times and see how best can I soothe myself. We as human beings and mammals, touch is really important. And right now, as we know, we can't even hug someone. We can't hold, others. We don't shake hands anymore. It's all namaste now, or elbow, and so it's been really challenging as mammals not to have that touch in our lives as much, maybe our family members, of course. And yet, so it's really important to also self-soothe in a way, especially when it's a difficult situation. Other benefits are it allows us to better cope and be more resilient in these difficult times. We actually are more motivated. So the self-critic, beats on me. I'm not going to feel 100% to then rise above, when the self-critic is beating at me. But if I'm self-compassionate, I'm more likely to, be more motivated to get things that I need to do and be more accountable. And especially in my world where I have worked in unhealthy weight, so in weight loss surgery department, it was really important for people to have a positive, healthy body image. If people start to say, well, Harpreet, like if I start saying to myself, you have no self-control, you're eating all this unhealthy food, you're going to be so, gain weight, you're going to be so unhealthy, you're going to look horrible. That's all, so it just goes on and on. Whereas if I say, Harpreet, you're making the best choices you can. We're not perfect. Maybe 90% of the times you're making good choices. Maybe 10%, in a group setting, you're sitting with family and you get tempted to eat your birthday cake. That's okay, So giving ourselves some slack, even though there is that accountability, using self-compassion, we can actually have a higher, better, healthier self-image. So there's a lot of research. If you, when you have a chance, please do visit Dr. Kristen Neff's website. It's called self-compassion.org. And there are tons of resources. There are hundreds of articles that have been listed there. And they actually talk about how self-compassion can actually help with the healthcare communities. It can help with PTSD. It can help with our own health and well-being. So there are tons of articles. If you have a chance, please do review those. There are lots of resources available. There are recommended readings. For example, I mentioned her book is called Self-Compassion. The book that she or Dr. Chris Germer, he wrote is The Mindfulness Path to Self-Compassion. And that's a great textbook. There's several articles and so forth. There's also a self-compassion quiz, which I love. I think it's a great thing to do as a like just doing an experiment for ourselves. Maybe we take a quiz first to get a baseline for ourselves. You know, how compassionate am I? And I actually had a, you know, very inaccurate reading on my self-compassion. I thought I was pretty good. And when I took the quiz, it was interesting to see how much more work I needed to do. So I started to cultivate self-compassion, you know, using the 3 components, creating a self-soothing mechanism, being more mindfully present, notice what's happening, notice the body and the mind, the thoughts that were coming, the emotions that were arising, my dialogue with myself or monologue with myself, and asking myself, is this something I will tell my best friend? So I know I'll, you know, I'm always really kind and nice to my best friend, but if they were to hear what I was doing pre-self-compassion days, they would run away and never be my friends, you know? So as I cultivated self-compassion over time, I was able to say those kind things to myself. In fact, there's one quick technique, it's called mirror therapy by Dr. Robert Holden. And what he recommends is very simple. We're in front of a mirror, you know, twice a day at least when we brush our teeth. And while we're looking at ourselves in the mirror, is it possible to just see in our eyes? You know, everybody else can see our face, but us. And in the mirror, so they say when you look in people's eyes, you can actually get into their soul through their eyes, right? You can actually look into the soul. And so through mirror, if you can just look into our eyes, in the beginning, it was really hard for me. I would see and I would be like, oh, your nose isn't just right, your eyes, you know, are asymmetrical, your cheekbones, this and that. And then I said, okay, time out, Harpreet. So start to say nice thing to yourself. So I started to recognize and say, good morning, you know, good morning. And that was it. So it took me weeks to months before I could say, Harpreet, like Kristen was saying, I'm here for you. I really am here for you. I care about you. We're going to get through this. It's going to be okay. And I love you. And so that's taken me a few years to get to this stage where, and you might get there much faster, or maybe you're already there. So that I invite you to consider that as an experiment and see if we can, while we brush our teeth in the bathroom, we're right there, you know, the mirror is right there. Is there something kind we can begin to say to ourselves? And honoring, you know, in the beginning when we can't say something nice, it's okay. You know, maybe it's been several years, several decades, we've been treating ourselves in a certain way. So we may not be able to shift right away. So it might take some time. And so practicing kindness in that even, you know, that we are not self-compassionate right away, being patient with ourselves and saying, you know what, it's going to take some time. It's okay. I'm going to start with just saying hello. So self-compassion, Kristen Neff says, love, connection, and acceptance are your birthright. To claim them, you need only to look within yourself. That brought me so much peace and there was this satisfaction knowing that I can choose to bring in love, connection, and acceptance within myself. Like, I don't need to necessarily have someone else show me that. I can, you know, create this insight within myself on my own. And I think that's very self-efficacious. It really allows me to cultivate those within myself. And it's more possible without us relying on somebody else. We can cultivate these ways to look at ourselves in this way. So I really thank you for your attention. And I will take questions if there are any or comments maybe, and I'll just leave them on this page, resources for self-compassion. Thank you.
Thanks, Harpreet. That's great. This is Sean. Thank you so much for sharing that. I had a chance to go down to Miami, and I actually took Kristen's mindful self-compassion workshop. It was so powerful. It was so amazing and so beautiful. One of the things that I'll share that I still do every single day is when I feel myself beating myself up, right? I didn't do a great job. I should have done it differently. I'm not good enough, whatever that may be of the day. My mantra to myself, I as well, I hold my hand like this, like cooling, right? And yeah, so there's some meaning there for me, but I'm a little not vulnerable enough to share what it is. But anyway, it's the point of it. And the mantra that I say to myself that I still love to this day is, may I give myself the same self-compassion that I would share with others, right? So in healthcare, we're all so compassionate, right? We're all so giving to others, but yet we turn around and we beat ourselves up right in the same minute. So it's kind of crazy, right? So I really appreciate that exercise. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. They were actually at American University, both Chris and Kristen came, I think that was 2 years ago, at the law school. They did the workshop, a 2-day workshop. So it was local. It was really nice. Thank you.
How fun. So someone says, when you said the program closed at JHMI, is that temporary? Is the program itself ended for good?
Yeah, so it actually closed at Sibley. However, my colleague is continuing to see patients once a week or maybe once in 2 weeks or at the Johns Hopkins Hospital, main hospital. But the program, yes, sadly so, closed permanently at Sibley Memorial Hospital.
Wow.
Yeah, that's really hard, yes. So.
Hey, everyone. Feel free to use the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself if you have some questions for Harpreet. I also want to point out Ashley sent a link in the chat where you can click on that link, and it just takes a couple of seconds to sign in, and you can get your MIM CEUs. I would just send a reminder, please try to be accurate with your MIMS number. If it's hard for us to find you in the MIM system, it's going to be awfully hard to give you the credit that you deserve for being with us today. So keep a look in the chat and let us know if you have any problems with that.
Harpreet, thank you so much for sharing all that you've shared. I wanted to ask you a question about, for me in particular, when I'm trying to practice mindfulness, I notice that I get very distracted. And a lot of the thoughts that float in, sometimes I find myself maybe 10 minutes out and I'm like, what was I doing? Not even realizing that I sat down intentionally to practice mindfulness and got completely lost. So I wanted to know if you had any tools for someone who's just starting this journey, trying to stay focused and practice self-compassion, because I'm also a person who's very hard on myself, and I can be very kind to other people, but learning to be kind to myself is probably one of the most difficult things that I have done in my life. And so this journey has been, for me, a very special journey, learning to be kind to myself. But that's one of the things that I noticed is that I am trying to practice some form of mindfulness. I get very distracted. And I really don't know how to bring myself back into focus or how to let those thoughts pass. So if you have any tools for that, I really appreciate it.
Yes, of course. Thank you for asking. This is really, really important. So during COVID pandemic, like in the beginning, I was having such a difficult time to sit and meditate. My brain was going everywhere. And so a good strategy, first of all, we know our brain is a popcorn machine. It's gonna pop thoughts. And so when we sit to meditate, it's not like we're gonna empty the mind of its thoughts. We're actually saying, let's use an anchor. So it's almost like imagining this boat and this anchor, on water, no matter how choppy the water might be, but the boat is anchored. And so we can use breath as an anchor. So it could be just, I'm going to sit and I'm going to focus on my breath. So what happens is I could sit down to meditate And I say, okay, I'm going to just notice my breath coming in and leaving, coming in and going. And then a minute or 2 minutes later, I find, like Ashley, like you, I'm somewhere else. So I, with compassion, self-compassion, say, oh, let's get back to the breath. So we just, like a puppy, you know, who keeps running back and forth, you know, we have to bring them back. And we use so much kindness to them. We say, sit, puppy, sit. We're training the puppy. So likewise, we just bring ourselves back, our, you know, thoughts back to the, or our attention back to the breath again. So we start to notice the breath coming in and out, or we could use sounds. So for example, if I close my eyes, I can actually listen to the humming of the air conditioning. I can listen to maybe some of the birds outside, maybe some tick-tock of the clock, you know, so I can just close my eyes and say, without making too much of a meaning of the sound, what sounds am I hearing right now? That allows the brain to take a break from the thoughts, and we can just focus on these anchors, the breath, the sound, or the, you know, the emotions. So just paying attention to that allows us to find an anchor. Self-compassion, you're absolutely right, Ashley. I think it comes with the territory. You know, most of us are maybe type A, you know, we're very perfectionist. We expect ourselves to be utmost, you know, perfect in what we do. And nothing, you know, we don't cut ourselves any slack because we cannot make mistakes. I mean, you're doing such important work. So I think it's really important, you know, to say, well, I have the best intention. I put in all my efforts and I really try to do a good job. I know perfection is the killer of creativity. So if I expect myself to be perfect, I will kill creativity. So can I look at things and knowing that I'm going to put in my best effort and I get an A for that. And the outcomes, you know, if it's an B plus or B, I have to abide with that and I have to accept it. So does that answer your question, Ashley?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
A lot of people hanging online. If we have about 40 people. Any comments?
Hi, Sean. I have a question.
Yeah. Hey, Randy.
Hi, Harpreet. Thank you for your time. Working in healthcare, as many of us are, not just EMS, but through the course of the day, a lot of times I will find that I've reached that point where I need to step away for a minute. I don't have the luxury of necessarily being able to step away for 5 minutes or whatever. Is there any exercise or anything you can recommend that will just help me like center myself again quickly so I can like just take in a deep breath and be able to say, you know, okay, it's done, it's over, or, you know, I need to move on and be able to move on successfully and better, feeling better as me to be able to do better for my patients.
Yes, thank you, Randy. Thank you for asking. So you're absolutely correct. We don't have the luxury of a lot of time. So the one quick exercise is 4-7-8 breath. I was sharing with Sean and Ashley earlier. I've been doing this 4-7-8 breath for our Healthy at Hopkins. You know, we just come online and we just do, so it's 30 seconds. We just do 4 breaths. It's breathing in from our nose. The tongue is behind the teeth like this. We breathe in from our nose for count of 4. We hold for count of 7. And we breathe out from our mouth for count of 8. And it goes like this. So you breathe in, you hold, and you make a sound, whoosh sound as you're breathing out. So it goes like, not very glamorous, but so we just do 4 breaths. It'll take you 30 seconds or maybe less. So that's one way. The other way is, as we cultivate in our most safe environment, when we cultivate this compassion or mindfulness, we can exercise that in a busy time. For example, Sean was showing like he does this, you know, So there's just a quick touch. I stand, I notice my feet on the floor. I'm noticing how that is. I'm paying attention to the ground that's supporting my feet. I can feel a sensation, the front and the back, the side to side of my feet. I feel a sensation. I can grow imaginary roots down. Even if I have no time to do that, I can just do this and I say, oh my God, this has been really a lot. Like, this has been rough. You know, Harpreet, this has been a rough day, Randy. Yes, we need to just move on. But yeah, I'm just acknowledging that this was hard. And as soon as we do this, it's like a sprinkling a self-care minute or a micro moment in our day that allows us then to kind of like, it's like a brushing teeth versus every 6 month, cleaning at a dental hygienist, So this quick cleaning that happens as the day progresses, we're able to sprinkle this self-care. So 12 hours later, or 8 hours or 10 hours later, I don't come home totally wiped and having done nothing for myself. So if I could give myself like these 4, 7, 8 breaths, I could do this driving, I could do this reading an email, I could do this walking from one patient room to the next, I could do this like listening to the call, I could do this, 30 seconds. And that has allowed my parasympathetic nervous system. So our autonomic nervous system, as we know, sympathetic, parasympathetic. Sympathetic is fight, flight, freeze. Parasympathetic, rest, digest, repair. So when we're resting, digesting, repairing by doing 4, 7, 8 breath, or by coming into this mindfulness, feeling our feet on the ground, we are turning on, balancing the parasympathetic nervous system so that we have less inflammation, we have more of the resting, digesting, repair, and so we're not over compensating with the sympathetic nervous system of fight, flight, freeze mode. Does that make sense, Randy?
It does. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
A lot of that was very useful and very good, and I will be practicing tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Harpreet, if I may add, someone shared with me, we were talking about practicing the 4, 7, 8 breath exercise, and she told me when I initially start that practice, I should do it at home first. Because
yes.
It activates the parasympathetic nervous system. It can make you tired.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting because it was something I thought, and I might feel I need to relax because sometimes I feel tense in my neck and my shoulders. And being able to practice something like that, I want to make sure that I'm also able to have enough energy to still do my work.
Yes. So 4 breaths usually, might make us relax. Some people, it can actually make them feel dizzy because if they're so high on adrenaline, maybe they will notice like a big change, or maybe they notice nothing, like nothing would happen. They've taken 4 breaths and they feel nothing, or they might feel like because they came into their body, because they realize now how exhausted they might feel. So it's almost like being present to the mindfulness. You're absolutely correct, Ashley. So for some people, they might feel tired. So in the beginning, please do not do this while you're driving or operating machinery or doing something that needs focus. However, as we start to do this, what you'll realize is you can just in a snap, you're actually able to come back into your body more, recognize this, and balance the 2 sides. And it becomes like a self-check-in process. Recommendations are to do this at least 4 times a day, 4 breaths 4 times a day. So I start in the morning, first thing in the morning. I use gratitude and 4, 7, 8. Instead of going through the long list of things I need to do, I say, okay, Harpreet, right now, 3 things you're grateful for, and do 4, 7, 8 breath. And then I do it again, maybe around mealtime or during transition from morning to afternoon to evening to bedtime. So I just do transition and move through the day using 4, 7, 8. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Ashley. We should try this at home and then, see how that affects your body and mind. Absolutely. Thank you.
I think there are even some studies, right? I think it was in the healthcare setting, I know it's been years ago, but actually showed that these type of exercises decrease cortisol too. Totally believable.
Yes, people have better control of their high blood pressure. It helps the mood, lowers inflammation. So we know a lot of chronic diseases are secondary to increased inflammation. So we can lower inflammation throughout the day. Then that's really helpful. I know we were talking, Sean, about healthcare workers burnout, and we know National Academy of Medicine and NAM has done a huge campaign over 5 years on clinician well-being. What we found is that clinicians, healthcare workers are at greater risk than general population of suicide and burnout. So if we can just sprinkle our day through self-care, self-compassion, breathing, gratitude practice, these are free, they're portable, they can be practiced anywhere. It really allows us to get through, go through our work and continue to, do this meaningful work without burning, actually be more resilient, and to do this work.
Yeah, such an important time, right? With this, with what's going on in healthcare and the burnout. Any other questions, you guys? Again, Ashley has circulated the link to the sign-in sheet and the chat function. Let us know if you are having any challenges. Great. I really want to just again acknowledge Harpreet for sharing all the dedication and the time that you dedicated to master this and to learn these skills and to spend yet more time sharing with us is just great. I also just want to re-emphasize, this self-compassion organization and the website and the workshop, maybe they'll even do something online, right? To make that available now that a lot of distance programming is coming online. So anyway, I'm keeping my eye out for that for sure. And it's just such a great website, right? So many different meditations that are available and exercises that they walk you through. It's a really amazing resource. Thank you. Thank you again for sharing. Thanks for being with us. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon. And thank you for the work each one of you does. I'm so grateful for your work. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Be well. I hope to stay in touch. Stay safe.
Thank you. Take care. Bye now.